Hello and welcome to A Sense of Centerville in Washington Township, your place for stories about ordinary and extraordinary residents and places in the Washington Township area. I'm Susan from Centerville-Washington History, and I look forward to hearing your story. Today, my guest is Mike Suhar. Mike grew up in Washington Township and graduated from Centerville High School in 1975. He received a degree in electrical engineering from the University of Dayton in 1979 and a master's in engineering management in 1986. He worked for Dayton Power and Light and Mead Data Central, now Lexis-Nexis. He is now retired and enjoys amateur radio and hand-sewing traditional kilts. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be on the show today.
Well, thank you. I'm always looking for guests, and Mike had attended our recent speaker series, and that's a great opportunity for me to meet people in the community. And it came up that he would be an interesting guest for this program. So I don't know Mike real well, so we're learning all together, and this will be an interesting experience. So thank you for being willing to do this.
Okay, glad to do it. Yeah, the history program, I've gotten a lot of information on. What I discovered is the railroad that Cincinnati owned, and that goes through the town my mom was born in Tennessee. I never knew it because it doesn't go by that name. It went by whoever manages the railroad. That's now been sold. Their 99-year lease expired, but that was the one thing that really surprised me.
I'm glad you're learning from those speaker series.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's go with our first question about your childhood memories of growing up in Washington Township.
Okay. Well, let's start with my dad was born in central Pennsylvania, and when the war came along, he ended up in the Navy, World War II in the Pacific Theater. When that was over, of course, a lot of servicemen needed to find jobs, and Dayton was an ideal location because you had General Motors here, you had NCR, you had the Air Force Base, a lot of other companies, and the industry had to retool from a war economy into a consumer. So they were hiring a lot of people, and a lot of people came in, especially from like the South. And Dad landed a job with General Motors and moved here in 47. Mom grew up in a small town in Tennessee, and she followed her two sisters up here. And my parents met in the basement of Sears, of all places, downtown. They were married in 55, and I was born in 57. In 1960, my parents decided to build a house, and the up-and-coming area was Washington Township, and that's where they ended up. They had a house, but I think it was built by Joe Ringer, I think was the name of the construction guy that actually built that, and he actually lived in that neighborhood for several years. And that was, again, 1960, so I would have been 3 years old.
And which area of Washington Township was it?
There on Seton Hill off of West Whip.
Okay.
So I attended, of course, Dr. John Hull Elementary School when I was old enough. And what I remember in that, of course, it was your typical cement block type school that was constructed at the time. They did build an extension on the front at the start of my third grade, and I ended up in my classroom in the third grade. And I think later on that was the library, and I think that is the part of the building that sticks out front on the left, and it's got the sliding like patio glass door. And it was a carpeted room from what I remember, which was entirely unusual, at that time. So from there, of course, I went to sixth grade in Hither Green, which I just thought was just amazing. It was the open school concept. It was air conditioning. It had carpeting on the floor. Parents and educators maybe look back at the open school concept as a failure, but anyway.
Most people don't know what Hither Green is,
right,
because that's the building that's been knocked down.
It's been
so
down.
It was in the neighborhood of Driscoll Elementary. That's where it was, and now it's a park.
It's a park, and it was a senior center.
It was a senior center.
It was no longer a school.
Yeah. Sorry to lose your train of thought,
okay.
But yeah, I think that's important to share.
Yeah, so I ended up in Hadley Watts, a brand new school, still open school concept, and driving by that, as I come down to the history presentation, I drive right by it. They've added on to that since I was there. I'd love to go in there and see what that place looks like now. It's entirely different, I'm sure. But anyway, that's where I went to middle school. And then in high school, it was MagSig building, and the building behind it, Virginia South, we called it the South Building. The new school, center part, I think, was there, and they had students in there. We called it the East Building at the time. And class of 75 was the last class to graduate from MagSig South. After that, everybody was in the new building. Mm-hmm. So I was never in the new building. All of my classes were in MagSig and South.
So at least you could walk from the different areas.
We
and
did
didn't have to be...
change classes. I had some classes in MagSig and some down in the South Building through there.
A complicated period of time for learning, I'm sure, as people had to transition between the different schools.
Yeah, but I was used to that because even in middle school, we transitioned to different classrooms during the day. You had, your math was with one teacher in one section of a pod, and then you moved to another one over there. But Centerville was interesting because they had the radio station there, WCWT, which I had nothing to do with, but they also had an amateur radio club there, and that was a big thing I got involved with when I was 13, was amateur radio. And having an FCC license, of course, for that. Roy Grimes was the technical person for WCWT at the time, and he came to me and he said, would you consider getting your second class FCC license? Then we could say the entire station was student run because I would be licensed as the technical. Of course, Roy would still be the main one in charge, of course. I looked at that and I thought, wow, if it's the second class, that's the big leagues. I don't think I can do that, and I never did. Later on, I did get that because of my first job after school, after graduating UD, and I could have passed that because it really wasn't much harder than the amateur radio extra class when it got right down to it. The other thing I want to pick up on in my early time, being in Dayton, there was a lot of interesting people here, a lot of engineers, design different things, and you might run across these people from time to time. And when I lived on Seton Hill, my dad we just moved in, and he was out in the driveway, and he noticed a man across the street that he knew probably from time at Frigidaire, and his name was Ralph Bruce. Now, Ralph Bruce was an amateur radio operator, and so was my dad, but my dad really wasn't active. So Ralph is probably the one that really got me into ham radio, where Dad was more, I used to do a lot of shortwave listening, and I had an old Hillcrafters receiver from World War II, and electronics, servicing, fixing radios and such. So I had that interest there. But Ralph was an interesting person. I loved to listen to stories when he was growing up in Hamilton, because he was in all kinds of mischief. But the important part was him. He was one of the founders of Production Control Units, which is still here in Dayton, but it's owned by other companies now. The other thing was he worked for NCR during the war, and he was part of the secret project for the decoding of German messages with the Bombi. Of course, I never knew that because he couldn't talk about it. I didn't know about that until after his death.
Wow.
But it's like, whoa,
There's a lot of things we don't know about people.
Yeah.
I'm glad you had that connection.
Yeah, it'd been nice to talk to him about it, though, to see what he actually did and various things. But yeah, you could run across people like that, and I'm sure many ran into other people that were major influences in business here in Dayton at that time of year, because like I say, we had just about everything here.
Yeah.
So anyway, I go to the Centerville High School. I graduate from there. I ended up doing electrical engineering at the University of Dayton. Started to work for Dayton Power and Light after that, ended up in the telecom, and again, ham radio kind of pushed me towards that. They lost their primary engineer on the two-way system and microwave communication system, and with my ham radio experience, I was temporarily moved into that position from the power plant sub-engineering group, and that became permanent. For 9 years, I did that, which was really interesting. But I felt at the time that, well, microwave communications and two-way radio, there really wasn't a lot of need for that. A lot of the vendors were starting to do the engineering and things. So I decided that IT was where it was at, and I jumped ship and got a job at Mead Data Central in their network engineering group. And I had various positions in the 30 years that I was there. And of course, that became Lexis-Nexis. And that's where I retired from in 2017 after 30 years. And that was a good move, going into information technology. And I did everything from the sales phone systems right away up through to the customer-facing computer systems that the customers hit the product with. And so, doing that type of work for 30-some years. And there's a lot of changes, and of course, in the computer industry and technology in that time.
So much, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But again, the main thing that I always did was ham radio through there, and that also shaped my professional career later on. We'll talk about some of the early times there in Centerville. When I moved into 1960, I remember a phone number started with TU5. That was the old phone number format where you had a word and they used 2 letters, and then the rest were numbers. I guess somebody figured it was easier, and I think that was probably Tuxedo 5 and then the 4 digits. I never knew what the rest of the number was. I'd forgotten it because it changed to a 433 number shortly thereafter, and my parents had that for years. So I contacted the Dayton Montgomery County Library downtown, and they had what they call the Dayton Room. And I had to leave a message, and I told her what I was looking for, and then she called me back a couple hours later and says, well, I'm looking in a 1963 Dayton phone book, and I see the 433 number. I said, can you go back to like 1960? And she did. And yes, she said it was TU5, and she gave me that number. So I know what that 885 number was now. But the other thing I said, I remember as a kid, and I don't know if my mind is playing tricks on me, but I remember a motel at Whip and 48. And I was talking to my friend Steve, who's older than I am, that grew up in that area, and he said, I don't remember that. Well, I asked her about it. I said, I thought it was the A&A motel, and she looked that up, and she said, that's on Route 25 in 1960, but there's an A and V that has a Far Hills street address, and that number is the same as the UDF that's at Far Hills and Whip today. So yes, there was a motel there.
And that was right near the Mapleville store, that Earl Miller.
Yeah, the Millers. And that, sometimes I'd ride my bike to Hither Green. And some of us would stop at that store after school and we'd buy candy there. And things were really different there because my friend Steve mentioned that, and he said, yeah, they used to buy BBs there, and they would have BB guns and they'd go out in the woods and shoot BBs. Well, you wouldn't do that today. You wouldn't be carrying something like that around. But he said they could get them cheaper at the general store there than going like to PK. So yeah, things really changed.
Was the monkey house there?
I remember that. It was there. It was on the other side of Far Hills on the west side. And I think it's in the area where there's a Sandy's fast food place there for a long time. There was also a small carry-out pizza place. I don't remember the name of it. My parents would get pizzas there. And it burned down sometime in the 60s, and that was the end of that. But I think the monkey house was like right around there at that time. I think it was mostly boarded up and empty then. Of course, later on, it got moved to Stubb Park.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. When we had talked at the speaker series, we talked about Foodorama, since that was pretty close to your house. Was that in walking distance?
Yeah, it was basically in walking distance. Now, my parents, of course, would drive there coming home from work or whatever. But my job when I'd go up there is to take the returnable bottles, because we were paying a deposit on like Pepsi bottles and things like that. And I remember that was my job to carry those into the store and put them in the bin where they went.
Did you get the money for it?
No, I didn't get to keep the money for it. So yeah, that was the major shopping. A&P then there was across the street at some point, and behind that was PK Lumber Company. My dad would shop there because he did a lot of woodworking stuff. And, so yeah, those were kind of the major stores. Other stores, I mean, it was a big deal. You'd go down to Reich's department store downtown, and you dressed up for that. I don't mean coat and tie, but you looked nice when you went down to Reich's on Saturday, and that's when we did our clothing shopping and things of that nature. But you didn't go down, in shorts and flip-flops. By the way, we called those thongs back in that day.
Yeah.
You dressed up nice when you went down there. So I remember now at Schuster in the winter, in December, they have the window displays that Reich's had, and those have all been refurbished, and they're in the lobby of Schuster on display in December.
Because the Reich's building was where the Schuster Center currently is.
Right.
So
they tore
that
the
building
old Reich's building down, and they built the Schuster in there.
Yeah. All right. So we talked a little bit about the schools you attended. What'd you do for fun? Now, we talked a little bit about getting candy on the way.
Yeah.
What kind of fun did you have?
Well, I did a lot of bicycle riding. I remember I had a couple friends that were in the Kettering school district, and they lived off a bigger road. So I would ride across Ron Road right after they cut that through. I think that was in the probably around 1970 or so.
Because you were in the northern part of the township.
Yeah, I was in the northern part. So that wasn't, I'd ride to up, was that Waterloo or Paddington, I guess, to Ron, and then straight across. And I remember carrying my bike across the railroad track because that street wasn't cut through. Little did I know I would live in that house that I rode by every single time at a later time. But yeah, that street wasn't cut through. And some of those people were told that it was never going to be cut through. Well, obviously it was. So yeah, it's one of the many things, because I do vaguely remember when that part of Ron Road didn't exist. It was just all farm field out there that time.
So there was quite a bit of railroad in our area, and now there's nothing.
Yeah, now there's nothing. The tracks were taken out, and that's Iron Horse Trail. We found a picture when I moved into the house on Ron Road in 1988. We found a photograph left behind by the previous owners, and it showed an engine sitting on the tracks next to the house.
Wow. I would love to see that picture.
I don't have it anymore.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what happened
That's
to
okay.
it.
That's okay if it ever shows up.
Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think it was really used that much. I think that's the one that went down by Ace Hardware, which was Centerville Mill at the time. I believe is where that went. But yeah, now they turned it into a bike path.
Yeah, it's a great bike path.
Yeah.
So how about in high school? What were the things that you were involved in?
Well, again, ham radio was the big thing. We did have a ham radio station. Max Orr, who was a biology teacher, he was the advisor for that. He was a licensed ham radio operator. There was probably only 5 of us in the school at that time, and that gradually dwindled. I think once I graduated, that was probably the end of them for a while. And that was the end of that as high school anyway. So I'm sure a club like that doesn't exist in the new school at all.
What did you like specifically about ham radio?
It was just basically the technology, the electronics, and radio propagation and antennas. I wasn't too big on actually communicating and talking to people, but I found radio propagation and antennas to be just absolutely fascinating. Like, why can I make a contact into Great Britain, or let's say Australia at 7 a.m, but I can't do it at 3 p.m. on the same frequency, because the ionosphere changes through the day and through the seasons. So I found that just to be absolutely fantastic, very interesting and fantastic. An
engineering mind for sure. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay, so you've mentioned a couple of people that have impacted you. Any other people that you wanted to talk about?
Not that I can really think of at this time. Okay. Those were the major ones.
And we'll see if any more come up. Yeah. And then how did you select your career in electrical engineering?
Well, ham radio had a lot to do with that, because I was working with electronics and I was trying to learn electronic design. So that's why I went towards that discipline. And I felt it was better to do engineering than being a service tech. I figured the salaries would be greater and greater opportunities, and I think that was the case at that time. Yeah, it worked out. Yeah. But like I say, I kind of jumped ship, because when I went into IT, they were hiring a lot of electrical engineers because they didn't really have a lot of computer programs in college at the time. They did have computer science, but that was more mainframe and programming and COBOL for business and that type of thing. So a lot of engineers got hired for that, but I wasn't working on discrete circuits and things anymore. It was mostly computer systems with a little bit of programming thrown in for good measure. And of course, some of that was telephone systems. We had a lot of sales offices like New York and Chicago, and we put in phone systems for those offices. I didn't do the actual installs. We had a couple techs, and we also worked with the vendors, whoever that might be, like AT&T. A lot of the systems came from them. So I did that for a while, and then got out onto the computer side.
So you watched the computer industry grow.
Oh, yeah. It's just absolutely amazing when I look back at what I had. My first computer that I had, which was actually it was a Xena Z100, they called it. I think Wright Pat had a bunch of those. And it ran MS-DOS, but not the version that was on the IBM PCs. And then later on, we had some apples where I worked at DP&L Apple II that I messed with, but I pretty much stuck with the Microsoft world. And didn't go back to Apple at
That's
all.
most engineers.
Yeah.
Want to know how things work
Yeah.
and be able to control things. Yeah, so fascinating. Yeah, it's exciting to see how technology's changed
Right.
over the time that we've been alive.
Yeah. And even amateur radio, initially it was Morse code or single sideband voice was mainly what you used. And there were some exotic things like moon bounce. You could actually bounce a signal off the moon, but that required very large antennas and a lot of power. We were licensed for 1,000 watts. Normally you only ran about 50 or 100. But the moon bounce people had gigantic antennas and power. And I didn't have space for that. And now things have gone digital, and I can do moon bounce with a much smaller antenna system and a lot less power, which I haven't done myself, but I'm looking into it. But digital communications has pretty much taken over a lot of it. It might be on keyboard, or it might be just a contact base where you're basically is decoding digital streams from some other station and responding to those. So
it's fascinating.
Yeah.
No,
and there's also amateur radio satellites in orbit, and the International Space Station carries amateur radio on board. That's used primarily for school programs, and most of the astronauts have a ham radio license. They say they use it mostly, I think, for school programs is what it's used for.
Well, very cool. Thank you for sharing all that with us. Okay, so now that you retired, what are the things that you enjoy doing in your free time?
Well, I have a 9-month-old puppy now, a Silky Terrier, and I want to try to do agility with the dog. So I'm doing various training. And this summer I'll be going down to the Silky National in Florida, and he'll be in one of the puppy confirmation. I don't know how well he's going to do because he's not really trained for that, but we'll see what happens.
Just for fun.
Yeah. So I've been, had dogs all my life, one way or another, and typically small dogs. A lot of rescues, a lot of Yorkie and Silky rescues through time. But this time I knew one of the breeders in Mississippi, and I went down in November and picked up a 4-month-old from the breeder I know in Mississippi. And brought him
Very
back.
brave.
Yeah.
Just start puppy
But then
training.
I had an interest in Scottish culture for a long time. It's not necessarily in my ancestry. My dad's side of the family was Eastern Europe, and my mom's side of the family was more of the British Isles, mostly English. But I tended to find that particular part of the history rather fascinating. So I had an interest, but I never had time to pursue it. And then around 2010, 2012, I started looking into it, and I was a member of a web forum that discusses kilts historian, kilts makers, people that wear kilts, and I was reading all this stuff. And one of the lady that makes kilts as a side business, she actually had a geology degree, and she was a professor at Hamilton College up in upstate New York. She offered a class for beginners on kilt making. No experience necessary. So, okay, I'll bite. So the first class was actually held in Victoria, British Columbia. The person she was working with was Steve Ashton, who had a kilt company there, and he would do the contemporary machine sewn classes. So I went out there, but I took Barb's class there. And then I would alternate. He would come to New York the following year and do the contemporary machine sewn, and Barb, of course, would do the traditional hand sewn. So I alternated between the two. And I still do that. In fact, that course is going on this week in upstate New York, and because of the dog and some other factors, I didn't go back this year. But I kind of had an interest there, and I started doing hand-sewn or machine-sewn kilts.
And how long has this been going?
First class was in 2012.
Okay, right. Okay.
So I then didn't go back to Canada anymore, so it was every other year in upstate New York. And then when she retired, she started doing it every year. So for the past few years, I've been going up every year. This one's the first one I missed for a while. I don't do it as a business. I do it just as a hobby. I don't do enough of them to stay proficient. That's the problem, because it takes me at least 40 hours to do a hand-sewn kilt because of all the hand sewing on the pleats in the back.
So do you wear them every day?
Yes, I wear them every day.
Every day, okay.
A lot of them in the summer are not the wool kilts. So I have on today, it's a wool kilt. Those get kind of warm in the wool socks. So I switched to either what's called polyviscose, which is a polyester rayon fabric, and it's made actually for kilts. It's tartan and the whole thing. Or I'll do solid colors in cotton or cotton poly. It's a lighter weight, and those are machine sewn, so they're a lot faster to throw together.
It's fascinating. Well, let's see some of you brought some kilts, and I'll take a picture of you when we get done just to show the one you have on. I don't know
if this will show up very, very well on the camera, but I wanted to show that when you lay out and you have a tartan, and of course it has all different colors on there, you have to decide how you're going to pleat the thing. And the way the tartan is designed sometimes sets the rules on that. You've got what's called the set size, which is the distance between the major colors, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. And then you've got other colors on there. Well, if I pleat it, what shows on the pleat? So I can choose any one of those colors, and it totally changes the way the back of the pleat, the
and
kilt
so this
looks.
is the art part of it.
This is the art part of it.
Is deciding how it's going to look.
And that's probably not what I do the best. I mean, Barb, who teaches that class, she sees patterns and things, and she can see those real quick. I have to struggle with that a little bit. And naturally, that thing wants to optimize. So we'll get to that later.
But that's what's fascinating about any hobby we do is it's the process of getting better at it that's interesting.
And that's where, especially when I'll show you, the hard part on the pleats is you've got those stripes and you have to line them up. And when you're sewing by hand, it pulls the material and shifts it. So you have to offset it, and you have to, through experience, figure how much do I offset it? And you can pin that all you want, and it still moves.
Yes, it's frustrating.
Yeah. And this is another thing. It's a small world. I was at the eye doctor a couple years ago, and the assistant comes in to take the preliminaries. And I was wearing my kilt at the time, and she was talking about a sock making machine that was made in the late 1800s. And they actually made fancy socks out of it. Well, she mentioned there's a guy that wrote a book on that. And I said, yes, that's Steve Ashton. And she looks at me like, where did you get that from? I said, well, he owned Freedom Kilts in Victoria. And he got involved in those machines, and he sort of went off in that direction after he retired and closed the kilt shop. But yeah, small world. She knew who Steve was.
It's fascinating.
But this particular kilt, it's a what they call young tartan. And if I hold it up, you can see the backside.
We can't hear your voice, though.
Yeah. You can see on the back side, there's a horizontal orange stripe, but you don't see really any verticals, except if you open the pleats up, like you're holding there, the orange is hidden inside the pleat. So when you walk, it flashes the orange. And that's the creative things you can do with some of these tartans. You just have to be able to recognize that and know that you can do it. The other thing, as I mentioned, doing cotton poly, the problem with that wool material, it's made by mills in the UK. It's getting to be very expensive. I mean, after COVID, it was like $100 per double width meter. And you might have from 4 to 8 yards wrapped up in all those pleats in the back. So that starts getting expensive fast. So I switched over to solid color cotton poly, and this is much cheaper material. It's machine sewn. You even have to sew the edge of the pleats because that material won't hold pleats very well. That's the thing about wool. Wool can be shaped. And when you make it, depending on your hip to waist measurement, you might have a lot of puckering because you've got to taper that in. And the nice thing about wool, if it puckers, just hit it with steam and pressure, it'll shrink right up and flatten right out. So there's quite a bit of difference in the construction techniques between the wool and something like this. The other material out there is known as polyviscose. I machine sewn these. It's a polyester rayon material. This is actually made by a company that specifically makes this material for kilts, Martin Mills. This happens to be the Outlander tartan. From the TV show.
Wow.
And I got a link.
Did you get it because of that?
Yeah, that was basically. I think it came from Celtic Croft, I think was the name of the company, and they were selling just the material, or you could buy a full kilt from them too. But I bought a few yards of that, and I made that kilt out of that. So that's kind of, and the other one is there's different pleating styles that you can do. Most of mine are knife pleats, like you would expect, and there's couple different types of knife pleats. The normal knife pleat, it just opens on one side and it goes all the way around the back of the kilt. The other type, though, you go halfway and then you switch to the other side, and then those join in the back together. And for reverse canusi, there's a box pleat hidden in the back because they join together. On a canusi, the box pleat is on the outside, so you end up with a tail in the back of the kilt. I've never done one of those because I don't particularly like that style, but I did do in this class. That's the nice thing about taking Barb's class, is she wants you to do something different. So I'd never done a reverse canusi, so I did that in the class a few years ago.
Can we see this one?
This one is a box pleat.
Okay.
And this is a Wallace tartan.
All right, so this is the box pleat. That
in the back.
The pleats are
they fold in on
into
each
other.
Right.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about, sometimes I said that sometimes the tartan dictates what you can do. This particular tartan, it's Hunting Modern Wallace. It has what's called a 9-inch set. This is the front side, and the distance between those yellow stripes is about 9 inches. So if you're doing a box pleat, you have 3 inches folded on one side, 3 inches showing, 3 inches on the other.
Can we see the back again?
Yeah, the back. And I did it. What did I do? I did it to the yellow stripe. So it was done to the yellow stripe in the back.
Well, I definitely have a greter appreciation for the kilts. That's fascinating.
Thing I will show, I think this thing came up, is the picture of the one kilt that I did that had a fairly complex pattern on it. What you see here is, you'll see different colors. It looks different because it's pleated to different stripes.
Yeah.
This is the set size on the front. And this was pleated to the dark. This one was pleated to the light. That was pleated to the red, and that was pleated to the yellow.
All right, hold it up again. So we've got the blue, the light blue, the red, and the yellow.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
So you have to figure out, okay, how do I want this to look? And that particular tartan can yield those styles.
So 8 yards, is that what you said?
It could be as much as 8. It depends on the set size and how big the person is. I have one kilt, the first one I made turned out to be 8.5 yards. It had a 5 1/4 inch set, and I had so much material. Barb said, well, double the set size. So now I have real deep pleats in the back. The problem with that is it puts a lot of weight in the back.
Yeah,
it
does a lot of weight.
I have 8.5 yards. Now, a box pleat takes the least because the pleats are wider. There's probably only 4 in that. Most of mine come out to about 6, maybe.
My goodness. All right. Well, I'm learning a lot about kilts, and I think it's exciting. It's interesting.
That's why, with what that wool costs now, it gets expensive fast.
Yeah.
If you've got the right
expensive hobby.
the right kind of tartan, you can cheat a little bit because it's double width, most of it. So you buy 4 yards, and then you cut it in half, and you can flip that side around. That's only if it's a symmetrical tartan. If it's what's called asymmetrical, that doesn't work because it won't match.
Man. Fascinating. Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your hobby and your stories with us. My last question is, what are you looking forward to in 2026?
Well, like I say, I'm working with the pup. I'm going to try to do agility. I belong to a Silky Terrier club based out of Michigan, and that's their specialty, is agility. So I've been participating. They host an event up near Cleveland in the summer, where they have an agility competition for all breeds. It's not just Silkies. So I've been helping them out on the course, doing course setup. So eventually I hope to have a dog. He'll be too young to participate this year. Dogs have to be 15 months old for that.
So it's just practice and fun.
Right now it's just trying to learn things. So I go to one of the local dog clubs here in town, and I'm doing training for that, somewhat obedience training. I can get him to do this stuff at home, but when I take him there, he's so distracted by other people and other dogs, he doesn't want to participate. So I'm fighting that right now. The other thing is with ham radio, I am treasurer of one of the amateur radio clubs here in town, not the big one, which, by the way, the Dayton Hamvention, the largest ham radio convention, will be coming up later this month, 15th, 16th, and 17th at the Greene County Fairgrounds. That started in Dayton in 1953. Moved to Hera, I think, in 67, and then, of course, Hera's demise, they had to move it somewhere, and it ended up at Greene County Fairgrounds. But that is the largest amateur radio convention in the world.
We have it right here.
Right here.
Yeah. That's exciting. Well, appreciate you being here, and
Mhm.
thanks for sharing your story. And anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to cover?
No, I can't really think of anything else. That's pretty much it.
Wonderful.
Like I say, I stay so busy. It's like I don't know how I had time to go to work back in the day.
And that says you're having a good retirement then.
Yeah, that's important. If you retire, you need to keep busy. And I
Yeah.
ran into a lot of people that retire for one reason or another, and they don't know what they're going to do.
Mm.
And that's going to be a problem for them later on. But
Yeah.
I keep busy enough, so hopefully I can keep going here for a long, long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing some of your stories about Centerville and Washington Township, and also your wonderful kilt collection. And I've learned a lot, and now I appreciate kilts so much more. And thanks also to MVCC for helping to produce this podcast, and to my guest, Mike Suhar. If you have an interesting story about Centerville or Washington Township, please contact Centerville Washington History. Please also come visit our museums in Uptown Centerville, Tuesday through Friday, 12 o'clock to 4 p.m. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram and watch for upcoming events posted on our website, centervillewashingtonhistory.org. Thank you and goodbye.